So over the last few weeks, we've been looking at and discussing this prelude to the Sermon on the Mount. And it's kind of a summary, or I say prelude because it really is the thematic introduction to the teachings of Jesus on the sermon. And it really is talking about the character traits of those who are his followers. We talked about the condition of the heart that makes no sense to most people in the world, the condition of the heart that opens us up to the presence of God and to be transformed. We talked about this counterintuitive gospel that really holds up and says that we should be celebrating when we're poor in spirit, grieving, and humble. That's completely opposite of the way the world is teaching us to be. Independent, strong, know-it-all. The best defense is a good offense. Yell when you're scared and you're not sure what's right and you feel like you've got to do something, yell louder. That's the rule. You got to be hard and strong. That's the condition, but the condition of our heart is different. Those conditions that are hungering and makes us hunger and thirst, however, to seek a different way, to seek something and anything to fill the hole in our souls. We're hurting. All of us, in one degree or another, all are grieving. All of us feel poor in spirit. All human beings are humble when they really look at things and see themselves in proportion to everything around them. And yet, we try to hide it. But it does cause us, in that kind of condition, to seek after and find wholeness, to find that hole and fill that hole in our soul. We are so hungry for that we'll eat just about anything to quench that thirst, to quench that hunger. When we were up in Canada, we went fishing up in Canada years ago. Vic and I went with a couple, and the couple was in charge, right, Vic? We're in charge of the food. And they had forgotten that Vicky hates fish. She doesn't like fish, doesn't eat fish. In fact, if we go into a restaurant and it smells fishy, I'm the first one to pull her out of there. Sometimes she'll struggle through it, but she's really uncomfortable with that. And that's cool. That's not a problem. However, when we went on this trip, our friends thought, well, we don't need to bring a whole lot of food. We're just going to eat our catch. We're going to eat all the fish we catch. They'd forgotten about Vic. So we started fishing, and we caught some fish. Fish, by the way, at that particular time, the first fish caught was the biggest fish of the entire trip, and it was caught by Vicky. You know, the Lord has a sense of humor. But it was getting close to evening time, and it was time to eat, and Vicky hadn't had much to eat the whole almost a day and a half, and she was hungry. And she was so hungry, she had some of her own fish. She ate just enough, but she got it down. And I was really proud of her for doing that. Otherwise, I don't know what we were going to do. The only thing left was mashed potatoes. The kind you add water to and they have to heat up. The fish, in spite of that, was going to be tasting better. Ultimately, because we're so hungry, we're really left with really two options. Where we hunger and thirst. We choose this diet. We have the choice of our diet, just as you do when you go home. You get the choice whether you're going to have potato chips or you're going to have vegetables, whether you're going to eat meat or you're going to eat, well, you know the differences. Or you're just going to forget about dinner altogether and just get into another big, large piece of cake. That's up to you. You make those decisions. Will you make the same kind of dietary decision how you're going to fill yourselves? We choose this diet. And it's really the choices between our own self-centeredness and God's righteousness. Now, when I say our own self-righteousness, our own self-centeredness, we pull from what everybody else is doing. We grab a hold of those ideas and we start trying them out and they become part of us. In fact, we gain that. That's how we, as children, we get our language, we get our culture, we just by osmosis. We just do. And then we get older and we're given more choices. We keep the old because it's comfortable for us. We get the slangs and the word choices because it's comfortable to us. And we use those as the basis for making other choices. So we're constantly evaluating and deciding how we're going to fill ourselves by what's around us. We look and see who else looks like they're filled, looks like they're enjoying it, and we begin to copy them. Begin to copy them. We don't even know we do it. Or which is counterintuitive to what everybody else does. You see, it's only by intentionally seeking God's righteous truth and actions will we find satisfaction and wholeness for us in all that we are. By choosing to follow Jesus and his righteousness, we receive his kingdom of heaven as his children, citizens, and ambassadors. We find comfort that only the comfort that God can give provide through his Spirit. We'll inherit the earth and ultimately win this battle that's going on between Satan and the Lord. But that's not all. Jesus gives us a glimpse of being transformed into the person we were truly meant to be before all of this stuff went south. We'll demonstrate God's mercy as we share his mercy with others. Our heart will become pure as we seek him and act with him, and we see him and seek him. We'll become peacemakers and be called his sons and daughters. We'll undergo persecution as we love the world as Jesus loved us and went on the cross, and he loves us still. Today we're going to look at the seventh blessing we'll experience as transformed into God's image. We'll become peacemakers. Matthew 5:9 says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Now, I don't know anybody who wants anything but peace in their lives. Do you? Well, it's interesting because there are families that do not know peace. Their lives are a constant drama. And that becomes their peace, believe it or not. They wouldn't know what to do if they didn't have drama in their families, if they weren't yelling at one another and pointing fingers at one another and just doing it to one another all the time. Now that's the extreme. But there are also families that they want peace, but they keep on looking in the wrong places for peace. We're going to talk about that. Peacemaking is, in fact, a theme that runs through the entire New Testament. Romans 14:19 says, "Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification." James 3:17 and 18 says, "But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow with peace reap a harvest of righteousness." It's so central to who we are. Jesus is referred to as the Prince of Peace. We read that today, Isaiah 9:6. For to us a child is born, for to us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. In Scripture, peace and reconciliation can be seen as one in the same thing. Think about it. Peace and reconciliation. The process of reconciling brings peace. The whole process of being a reconciler is to bring peace. And so in 2 Corinthians 5:16 to 21, we hear these words. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly pure point of view. That is the way we did before we know Christ. Though we once regarded Christ in this way, we do so no longer. Why? Because now he's living in us. He's no longer a historical fact or a historical person. He is now a living Lord that lives by his Spirit within us. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. It's already with you. The old has gone. It's passing away. The new is here with you. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. He did it for us, that we be reconciled with him, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. Be reconciled. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, and though God were making his appeal through us, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so what we do is what God and what Christ did for us, we do for others. Peacemakers help reconcile humankind with God and with one another. We bring peace to one another. It is the great commandment of Christ when we hear his words, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourselves. There is no commandment greater than these. You see, when you're loving someone, you want the best for them. You want them to have peace. You want them to be reconciled. You don't want to see the damage they're doing with the hate and the anger and the bitterness that's running in their lives. You love them just like you would not want it in your life. You wouldn't want someone treating you with anger and with bitterness and with vengeance. You turn around, and out of love in your life, you turn around and you present a whole different way of living so that they can also be reconciled to God, and through that be reconciled with you and find peace in the world. Now, like love and mercy and forgiveness and the rest of the fruit of the Spirit, by the way, working through us, reconciliation and peacemaking can never be the focus of our lives. Now, let me repeat that again. None of the fruit, none of the love, none of the forgiveness, not focusing on mercy, can you produce the fruit. When you're focused on the fruit, you're not focused on Jesus. It is focusing on Jesus that produced the fruit, not the other way around. With our only intention focused on unconditional love, we can lose sight of Jesus. This is one of the problems that's happening in the church today. We talk about loving Jesus, but we focus so much on loving one another, and we're so interested in them loving and being loved that we compromise the gospel. We compromise God's love. And God takes a side step, or is sitting off to the side. Instead of being through God, he sits on the sidelines while we're so busy loving the world. We hear it in a secular sense. Love is what it's all about. They'll say Christmas is all about love and loving one another. No, Christmas is about Jesus. It's not about love. It's about Jesus. Then comes the love of God. We get the cart before the horse, and then we forget the horse. with our attention only on grace, after all, we're supposed to forgive and grace people. We're supposed to always be able to turn the other cheek, always showing grace to everyone, always accepting everyone, giving them grace. What happens is we cheapen salvation. We make it cheap grace. And God sits on the sidelines as we are proud about the fact that we show grace and sympathy and empathy to people who are doing evil, real evil, to themselves and to others. With the only goal is to reconcile and make peace, we can play into the hands of Satan and work against the very thing we desire. Think about that. I want peace. Peace at any price. But peace at any price will never bring peace, only appeasement and therefore pain. Think about that. I want peace in the house, so I'm going to let my children or I'm going to let my relative just simply do this junk in front of me and everywhere else. He's going to do this stuff, and I'm supposed to just sit back and let him do that because, after all I just want is peace. I just want peace. That story is really true. This was the problem we had before World War II. After Hitler invaded the Sudetenland, and he did it, and he didn't ask permission. He just said, this is my right, we're going to take it over. Neville Chamberlain went to him from England, and he said, I don't want you to do that, and we just want peace. And Hitler said, of course, we're just going to have peace. We're just going to have peace. All I want is that. That's all I want. And Neville Chamberlain came home and flew in, and he said, we will have peace in our time. And then Hitler went to Poland. And then he went to France. And then he went toward Russia. And then he went and went and went and went. See, we love peace. In World War II, we did not want to go to war. This country isolated itself after World War I. We did not want a war. We did everything we could. That was their battle in Europe. That was their problem with Hitler. We're just going to stay neutral. Everything is going to be fine. And Hitler went on and on and on until he couldn't take it any longer. And finally, it was really what set it off was Japan's Pearl Harbor event, attacking us. You see, if we had nipped it in the bud, if we had declared it as being evil and unacceptable, maybe a lot of this problem that we had and all of the garbage that went on afterwards and all the deaths that happened because of it could have lessened at least. But we didn't. We just wanted peace. We just want peace. Evil is real and will disguise itself as good and to complete its goal of destruction and pain. Evil always paints itself as being somewhat good. No one gets up in the morning and says, I'm just the evilest guy in the world, and I just want what I want, and I know it's evil, but that's okay because that's the way I am. And of course, people don't follow that person. But they will follow an ideology that has on its surface being righteous, being good, being the right thing to do. We see it throughout our history, even today in the Middle East. Hamas is the victim. It's always the victim. It's always Israel's fault. And yet they do such brutality to people and have no regard for anyone other than those who are Muslim. And even the ones who are Muslims, if they don't agree with their style of Muslim, they destroy them as well. We don't hear about a lot of that. We have this thing that we just It's an obsession. I don't want to have to go to war. I don't have to want to do this. And then we've opened our eyes, and now we have to do a lot of catch up because we're not paying attention. Keeping our eyes on Jesus then frees us from the two extremes to make peace happen. The first is that peace at any price. That peace at any price. Allowing destruction and allowing destructive protests is not acceptable. Oh, well, maybe if we're nice to them, they'll go away. Maybe they'll learn that that shoplifting is not really helpful for them. Maybe they'll understand, after all, they're only doing it because they're poor and because they're hungry. And yeah, I mean, they want to prod a purse, but they want that rather than just something simple. That's what they want. We just don't say anything, and maybe they'll all go away, and we'll have peace. But the other side of that is very true too, and that is that if anything absolutely goes wrong, then we go to war. We start to defend ourselves. We start to point fingers. We start to get angry. Both of these can be self-destructive. We are so tied up with the expansion of the United States that the great word that was given during that time of the 19th century was manifest destiny. And we were so blind to us, and this is the way we were. It's just the way human beings are. It's like slavery. We've always had slavery, and you blame someone for having slavery in the 19th century. They didn't know any alternative. There was only grassroots of thinking about being anti-slavery or not having slavery, and that slavery was wrong. But for thousands and thousands of years, slavery was normal life. You never even thought that it was unrighteous or that it was sinful or anything wrong with it. It was only later on that we discovered it. Well, just like manifest destiny, we never gave any thought to it. That's how the rest of the world thought. Even Christians were saying, we're going to Christianize those heathen. Think what would have happened if we were really serious about being peacemakers. How we would have respected boundaries and treaties and allowed for the times where we could build relationships with Native Americans that would have been inevitable. They would have come into a new kind of life as they, generation over generation, moved into it. Just like people who immigrate and their children come with them into this country, and over 2 or 3 generations, they start to come into the new culture, bringing their old culture with them in a wonderful way. But no, we wanted what we wanted. We were blinded by it, and we weren't really interested in peace because, after all, they weren't really humans. They were savages. See, peacemaking. Where's the peacemaking? There was that moment when we had bombing of Pearl Harbor, and almost as a knee-jerk reaction, we diminished Japanese Americans, and we put them in internment camps, Christian and non-Christian. Now, there has always been a theme of pushing against that, but the overarching permission was given by the country to do so. Peacemaking, listening. The language and demonstrations occurring right now between Hamas and Israel is probably one of the best examples. We have a group of people, I don't even call them a country, but a group of people who have said publicly, written into their constitution, that the only good Christian, the only good Jew is a dead Christian and a dead Jew. The only good person is Muslim. They've said it, they act it out, and yet we keep somehow saying these poor people. And yes, Some of them who are in Gaza are struggling, very hurt people. They need our help. But the power games that are being played and the way that it's being played, where's the peacemakers? The peacemakers are saying, we need a truce, we need a truce, we need a truce. We don't want the war, we don't want people hurt. Oh, please, oh, please, oh, please, don't hurt anybody else. And Israel has done that at least 3 times with Gaza. And each time, they just built up more ammunition to do it again. When are we going to learn? That's probably the most political you're ever going to get from me, folks. I'm sorry, but it's bugging me. You see, when we're after real peace, when we're really after being peacemakers, listening not with ears of fear or our whole desire to have peace at any cost, but with the heart of Jesus guiding us, we become slow to anger and keep focused on the real issues, not on our own issues, not on ourselves. We're able to look honestly at what is in front of us and begin to discern what is really dynamically going on. And we can't do that just by watching the news for all the bias that is going on. There's got to be something more to it than that. Through the wisdom of Jesus, we start asking the important questions and seek honest and true answers. Doing so gives us opportunity and gives opportunity for evil to become recognized. Because we stand back, because we're not fearful, because we know God's in control. We don't have to be defensive, but we can begin to evaluate and seek what is really happening around the world and around us, and we are then able to then make a choice. Because Christians aren't afraid of conflict. Oh my goodness, no, we can't have conflict in a church. Conflict is necessary sometimes, but the degree of conflict is something we can control. Christians are not afraid of conflict, so when there is no other choice and evil is evident, we can follow Jesus into the conflict and we know we will win. It's not like the Spanish-American War, where we humped up a reason to go to war with Mexico so that we could get a border and get our border to where we wanted it. It's not like we've done other things. America's not pure. America's made a lot of mistakes, and we who are after that effect are here to learn from them, not to hold them up as an example, because we've done some really wonderful things. If it weren't for the Marshall Plan, Europe would look entirely different today. It's the United States that rebuilt Europe, and we did it with not spending a lot of money, but also not them spending a lot of money. It was a wonderful thing that we've done, and we did. We can follow Jesus anywhere. So we're called to be peacemakers. Well, one argument can be, and oh boy, somebody going to write letters to me now. One of the things is we hear back in the Old Testament where God gave them the promised land, and Israel went into the promised land, and he had one city. He says to Israel, when you go to war, kill every single human being. Do not take anything out of the city, but to wipe the city out. Now, non-Christians will point to that as saying Christians were Israel did genocide. Yep, they did. And why did God do that? First, remember, Old Testament is always a struggle between the kingdom and what was normal at the time and what people normally thought of doing. What God was saying is, this is what's normal. And that's exactly right. When you came in, you took slaves out, you killed everybody else, and you leveled the city. That was normative life. And God ordered it done there. Why? Because he knew that if he left a single individual alive, it would come back to haunt them and bring not peace, but more war. That's not a rationalization. That's a truth. So, you want peace, you got to do it God's way. And I don't mean go out and wipe out a city and do all that tomorrow. No. What I mean is you've got to listen to what the Lord tells us to do. He wants them reconciled. He wants Hamas reconciled to Jesus. He wants the Hezbollah reconciled to Jesus. He wants Iraq to become a Christian people. And he's going to try to do everything he can to make peace so that the gospel can be seen and experienced. But he's also not going to stand still and allow evil disguised as good come and destroy his people. God will protect Israel, and he will protect us. Peace is what we're called to become. Not lackeys, not just sit around and hope and wish, but actively involved in demonstrating God's peace toward others. And if that means we sacrifice our own lives by giving up our lives for that, to demonstrate that peace, that I give my life for the peace of what's happening here, then that's fine. We're not afraid of that. But peace can only be found as we follow Jesus. Amen.